Friends, I welcome you to my channel. Before listening to this story, I will ask you to like and subscribe. It is not difficult for you, but it is pleasant for me. And we're starting. I gripped the hard, implacable steel in my hand, as if my life depended on it. The pistol grip seemed comfortable, even inviting, as if it had been made especially for me. My finger hovered over the trigger, twitching dangerously. One click. That was all that was needed. One little push and I could end my life. Exactly. An overwhelming feeling of divine power came over me. Killing someone shouldn't be that easy. But it's simple. Tears were streaming down my face, and my heart was clenching in my chest. It twisted in unnatural directions, twisting into an unrecognizable shape. It was hard for me to think straight. All I could do was feel. To feel pain, rage, impotent hopelessness. They were like omnipresent creatures lurking inside me, almost alive. "Kill her," rage whispered in my ear in a demonic voice dripping with evil. The pain, on the contrary, screamed loudly in agony. Hopelessness just wanted to give up life completely. All three of them were forced to witness that terrible show where I was sitting in the front row. "Just pull the trigger," my dark passengers chanted. "Make us feel better." My rational brain tried to turn on. The good, decent man inside me was trying to get me back. He told me that after I did this, nothing would be the same. There will be no return to what was before. My fate will be decided. I'm officially going to be a murderer. What is he talking about? Everything has already changed. She took care of that when she chose him over me. It was her choice that brought the three of us here. It's her fault. She did it. Now shut up and let me give her what she deserves. The terrible day when she told me that our life together was over was a week ago. With a voice full of regret and a lump in her throat, she told me she had to leave. She should be with him. Her love. I wish I could say that I took this news like a man. I wish I could say that I invited this fool to kick stones on her way out of my life forever, and finally slammed the door behind her cheating ass. But I didn't do any of that. Instead, I lost all my dignity. Every last ounce. I threw it at her feet, begging her not to leave. I begged. I sat and cried like a widow at a funeral, begging her to love me more than she loved him. We've been through so much. We had plans for the future. We were going to take our child and move into that big house that she liked. It was her dream home. She imagined herself in a house like this when she was a child. Still, those plans weren't enough for her to decide to stay with me. Our love wasn't strong enough to keep her from getting into his bed again and again behind my back. Of course, it wasn't enough to let him go. "I'm sorry you had to find out this way. I love you, really, but I can't leave him. I have to follow my heart," she cried, hugging me, begging me to understand. I could feel the moisture on her cheeks as she pressed against my face. With each sob, her ragged breath danced on my neck. What was it that she wanted me to understand? Did she really expect me to make it easier for her? Was I supposed to just give her my blessing so she could find happiness without me? Has she gone completely crazy? I gave her everything. That's it. I would have given more if she had asked. But this? It was something I would never give her. I will never give her my blessing to be with another man. How can any man agree to this? How can he just sit back while the woman he loves is sleeping with another man? I'm going to kill her. She must die. I aimed at her back. The iron front sight protruding from the front of the gun was perfectly positioned between the two protrusions at the back, just like I practiced at the shooting range. It was perfectly flat, pointing right at the place on her spine that he wanted to destroy. Right to the point. I can finish her off at any moment, and she won't even realize what hit her. Her shoulder blades moved rhythmically while her shadow danced on the wall of the candlelit room. Her small, well-groomed hands were pressed tightly against his chest to give her the leverage she needed, sensually rotating her hips on him. Even the softness of her silhouette was beautiful. How could such a beautiful and erotic scene be so disgusting? My mind teased me with memories of running my hands over the curve of her spine. I could practically feel her soft skin on my lips, running kisses from her shoulder blade down to the curve of her buttock. The ghost of her eyes looking at me with lust while we were making love was real enough to make my lips stretch into a smile. A low moan pierced the air, pulling me out of my reverie. She threw her head back and took a breath after moaning, as if she was preparing to let out another one. Although I couldn't see her face, I knew exactly what it looked like. I've seen him so many times that I could probably close my eyes and paint a picture. Her trembling lips were parted. Her eyes were tightly squeezed shut, and a tense expression was frozen on her forehead. Her hips sped up as she chased after that moment of sweet release. The asshole underneath her was pumping his pelvis to thrust into her over and over again. They moved smoothly together, each of them working on a partner. They gave their bodies completely to this moment. They were like passengers on a blissful trip. I remembered the days when we were just as in sync. Damn, it was only a week ago. I saw his eyes roam lustfully and appreciatively over her curves, while her snake-like movements used his body for their own pleasure. The room was several degrees hotter than the rest of the house. So was my rage. They were so involved with each other that they didn't even realize I was in the room. They didn't hear me enter the house, climb the stairs, and open the door with a creak. Now they were facing imminent death and knew nothing. They were lost in their sea of nirvana. I will turn this into a river of blood and retribution. How could she be with him? How could she stop loving me so easily? No matter what she said, she couldn't love me and do this to me at the same time. No person who loves someone would break their heart so easily. Has she ever loved me? My heart started beating faster, both from anger and anticipation. I mentally prepared myself for the sudden shot that would come after I pulled the trigger. I weakly tried to calm my nerves and stop my hands from shaking. Shooting paper targets in a shooting gallery is one thing, but like this, tears burned my eyes as everything blurred in front of them. It was getting harder to keep the gun at the ready every moment. I wanted them dead so badly that I could taste their blood, but I couldn't control my inner voice. My demonic passengers tried to silence him, but he was there, begging to be heard. This is wrong. He was right. It was wrong. But standing there watching their harmonious lovemaking was the hardest thing I've ever had to do. It was like they were dancing to their own music. His hands moved purposefully along her body, as if they belonged there. His gentle caresses along her erogenous zones encouraged her to continue her journey to climax. At that moment, I realized how well he knew her. He knew her body, every inch. He was inside her more often than I wanted to think. She was a liar. A damn liar. She told me that her body was meant only for me. I was the only one who was lucky enough to enjoy her feminine curves. She said she belongs to me. But this jerk was lying and enjoying the thought that he was making love to a woman who belonged to him. The bullets begged me to release them from the chamber. They had a burning desire to do what they were created to do. They had to fulfill their purpose. They were hungry. They had an insatiable thirst for blood. His blood, her blood. They'll even take mine if I want to. I felt my finger tighten on the trigger. I blinked away the moisture. My gaze was fixed on her back again. I saw my goal clearly again. I knew exactly where the bullet would go in and how much damage it would do to it. She won't kill her right away. She would still have a few moments of respite. That would be enough time for her to see him join her on her journey to hell. Die. Die of pain. Just before I freed hell and torment, I saw our son. He wasn't physically in the room, more like a flash of memory in my head. I saw his face, which looked like mine, his smile, his hair. Bobby Jr. was an exact copy of me. My finger relaxed as his eyes looked into my soul. How could I do this to him? This act of revenge will not end with the cheater bleeding to death in the arms of her lover. For Bobby, this will be just the beginning. My retribution will be at his expense. Heck, I wasn't the most attentive father. I wasn't here for him, as a father should be. I was practically a stranger to him. And yet, I loved him. In my own way, I loved him. Did I love him enough to let his mother burn my heart with impunity? Did I love him enough to leave everything in the past for him? Yes, I did. At that thought, the gun began to descend. It was no longer aimed at her back. I died a little more inside, letting my opportunity for justice slip away. I needed it. I really needed it. But he needed her more than I needed retribution. Having made my decision, I began to slowly back out of the room. I silently, easily took every step, retreating. In the background, the two fools continued to make love, completely oblivious to how close they had come to their end. I'm almost out, almost freed from the grip of revenge. My soul remained untouched. But fate has a cruel sense of humor. Just when I decided to do the decent thing, I heard it. That gut-wrenching sound was so terrible, so wrong. It almost killed me. I love you, baby. Her soft voice was barely audible, but the words were deafening. Those 4 words instantly engulfed me, filling me with such agony that they almost crippled me. She was saying the same words to me, in the same tone. They were uttered in a hoarse voice that trembled due to her condition, but they were full of love and affection. She loved him. Did she love him? Instantly, I felt overboard and drowned in a sea of pain, hopelessness, despair, and white-hot rage. I couldn't swim. I couldn't breathe. The water was too choppy. The waves were too strong. The more I struggled with it, the more my lungs burned, filling up. Finally, I gave up. I didn't have the strength to resist. Fate has won. They should have died. I will end their world forever. But not like that. Not with this gun. I will not give them the peace that a silent death could provide. I wanted them to be in as much pain as I was. I wanted them to feel the same loss that I did. When they die, they won't feel it. One of their last memories will be the sweet love they experienced. It just won't do. I wanted something else. I wanted to rip them out of each other's hands, kicking and screaming. I wanted to smear everything about their love. I wanted to take everything they held dear and strangle them with it. I left them alone with their love. I'll give them a reprieve for tonight. Just for tonight. I hoped they would like it. This will be my last gift to them. The pen is stronger than the sword. Edward Bulwer Lytton. I was going to kill them 1,000 times using a more powerful weapon than my 9mm Beretta. I will make them wake up every morning and regret their existence with a simple device. Handles. Half an hour later, I entered my empty apartment with a sinister smile on my face. The sadness and pain I felt were hidden by my insatiable desire to see them suffer. I wanted to see her face distorted by such deep loss, so that it would match what I saw in the mirror when I thought about her. I sat down at the table and took out a pen and a notebook. Then he started writing. The words spilled out of me like vomit. My pain was burping and splashing on the paper. It took 5 drafts until I was satisfied after reading what I had written. Then I sealed their fate in an envelope, put a stamp on it, and went to the nearest mailbox to drop the letter. I could have just put it as outgoing mail in my inbox, but I had to walk around and drop it to make sure I couldn't change my mind. As soon as I dropped the letter in the mailbox, I was left with a lonely feeling of rejection, as well as anger at betrayal. As I trudged back to my apartment, my shoulders sagged under the weight of the world. Damn it, I hated the hell out of her. I hated her. I still loved her. My pride didn't want to admit it, but it was true. I will love her for some time to come. Nevertheless, there is a small piece of hope left in me. I knew that life would move one way or the other. No matter what happens to Rachel, the days will turn into weeks, which will turn into months and years. One day, all of today's events will disappear into the ether of history. They will turn into a sad story of my past. Tomorrow's current events will overshadow today's. When I reached my doorstep, I giggled to myself at one last thought. In about 3 days, I will change her life so that she will never forget me. No matter how much time has passed, she will never be able to dismiss me as a historical point in the history of her life. I'm going to be the jerk who changed her future. Letter. Dear Robert Hemsley Sr., my name is Jonathan. You don't know me, so don't bother trying to remember my face. We met once about 3 years ago, but I doubt you even remember me. It was at a Christmas party that the company throws every year. You were so engrossed in talking to Rachel that you barely noticed me. The way you looked at her and danced with her gave the impression that there was no one else there. No matter how many times she confessed her love to me, it didn't match the way she looked at you that night. That's when I realized it. I knew she was more in love with you than with me. That was the first time I knew you existed. She had never mentioned you in the office before. She didn't even wear an engagement ring. As soon as she stepped into this building, you no longer existed. I shouldn't have been at that party. She tried to come up with any excuse to keep me at home, but I insisted. I wanted to be with her tonight, so I ignored her lame arguments and came anyway. God, would that really be the biggest surprise of my life? I should have put her out of my mind and run as fast as I could, but I couldn't. I refused to believe it, no matter what my head told me. Instead, I believed her lies when she told me that you meant nothing to her and that I was the only love in her life. I believed them because my heart wanted me to. Although I know you, you don't know me. However, you know the woman I love. You know her well. You see, you know her because you're married. We've been having an affair for 4 years now. I know what you're thinking. Yes, we are together for just over a third of your marriage. You're probably chalking it up to a mistake. Maybe this letter was meant for some other loser husband. Or maybe I'm confusing your Rachel with another woman with the same name. This last shred of hope that you desperately cling to will not allow you to believe that your wife will ever do this to you. At the moment, I can prove this to you by describing the intimate parts of her body. You know, the parts that a man can't know about unless he's seen her in the throes of passion. I really could do it, but I don't have to. I have much more precise evidence. My son. All you need to do is check on Bobby Jr. I'm saying that your son is not your son. He is my son. I am his biological father. He may have your last name, but he has my blood in him. Don't you believe it? Well, it's good that we live in a world of opportunities to get to the truth. All it takes is a swab from the inside of his cheek. But I'll save you some time. Attached to this letter is a copy of the DNA test that your wife did a couple of years ago. She doesn't know that I have it. She destroyed the original. However, when she was sleeping in my bed after she showed it to me, I made a copy. Maybe I subconsciously suspected that the three of us would end up at this point. I was at your house tonight. I saw you two making love in your bed. It was the hardest thing I've ever had to endure. I kept thinking about how Rachel and I made love on this very bed. Every time you were out of town, I was by her side. You looked so pleased. You were sure that she was yours and yours alone. Do you want to hear something funny? Probably not, but I'll tell you anyway. A little over a week ago, I had the same confidence, in the same bed. The same words she said to you. She said to me many times. You're probably wondering how I got into your house unnoticed and why I ended up there in the first place. Well, it's easy. I know where you keep the spare key. I've used it several times to get into your house unnoticed by the neighbors. On those warm nights, I walked up your stairs and into your bedroom. Rachel was there, in your bed, waiting for me. I managed to go unnoticed because I know your living room so well that I can walk around blindfolded and not bump into anything. I managed to climb the stairs quietly because I know which stairs creak. Rachel was always adamant about not waking our son. Yes, he was at home, sleeping in his room, so she always made me walk on tiptoe. Why was I there today? The answer to this question is a little more complicated. There's no point beating around the bush, so I'll just say it. I was there, in your house, to kill you both. Do you want to know what stopped me? My son. I knew that killing you two would change his life forever. I couldn't do that to him. He doesn't deserve it. I wish I could tell you that I'm sorry about all this, but I'm not. You need to know which woman you're married to. The love you share with her is not only yours. This woman is not only yours. Before she decided to end our relationship, she was trying to figure out how to leave you. We were going to live together. I do not know why she suddenly changed her mind and decided to stay with you. I think you've won in this aspect. But did you really do it? Does this knowledge make her love less special? Does it hurt to know that she can so easily give her love to another? Since it is no longer a rare item, does that make this love less valuable? Does that upset you? I hope that's the case. I hope that the pain you're experiencing will make you smarter than me. I hope that you will do what I should have done when I realized that her affectionate words of love were nothing but a lie. If you're worried about having to look over your shoulder, don't. I will end this letter with a promise. You don't have to worry about me trying to finish what I started. I will never bother you again. You can send the police after me and arrest me for breaking and entering if you want, but I bet you won't do that. I bet you realize that your quarrel is not with me, just as I realize that mine is not with you. Wouldn't you rather think of me as the guy who opened your eyes? I will never bother you again because you are both in my past. I need to let her go and heal. I can get over the pain of losing her. Eventually, I'll move on, and she'll just be the bullet I dodged. What I can't get over is the pain that comes with constantly hating her. She's not worth it. Not anymore. If you want my advice, get rid of her. The loss you will feel after doing this will pale in comparison to what you will experience if you always have to be surprised. Every day you will ask yourself, won't she leave me today for another man? Believe me, When I tell you that watching her walk out of your life is enough to make a man do unthinkable things. Take this advice, no matter what it costs. Sincerely done with her, Jonathan. 3 years later, I looked at my watch for the millionth time and stared at a pimply teenager who couldn't figure out how to make a simple sandwich. How long will it take? If I had known it would take so long, I would have gone back there and done everything myself. I was already in a bad mood. It's been 2.5 years since I was last here. There were a lot of bad memories associated with him. My plans were to close this contract that my job had sent me to sign and get the hell out of here as soon as possible. If I'm lucky, I'll be able to do it without running into ghosts from my past. John? I'm never lucky. I heard my name spoken almost in a whisper while standing in line and waiting for my lunch order to be collected. A quiet, sad voice came from behind me. I didn't have to turn around to recognize the owner. I remembered him. Once upon a time, hearing her say my name would have made my heart flutter, but not anymore. I turned to face the beautiful siren of my past. Rachel. My eyes met hers again, as they had so many times before. A strange feeling of déjà vu came over me. It was where our first date was many years ago. It wasn't really a date. It was more like having lunch with a colleague. At least that's what we told ourselves at the time. However, the undeniable physical attraction between us, as well as the growing tension due to flirtatious banter mixed with bedtime hints, made our lunch together not at all innocent. I didn't know anything about her husband at the time. She was an accessible woman to me. But to be completely honest, I wouldn't care if I did. As soon as I looked into her eyes and heard her guttural laughter, I was gone. I succumbed to her charms, her song, and finally met my fate. Yes, I was nostalgic for the erotic memories that Rachel and I had. But other memories followed. Disappointment, loneliness, insanity. Rachel flashed a small smile and waved at me as I turned to her. I thought it was you, she said, giving me another one. Hi, Ratch, I said, unwittingly doing the same to her. An old habit. She was still knockout. I couldn't help but appreciate it. I didn't expect to run into you here. I was pleasantly surprised by how calm my inner state was. My voice was smooth and full of sincere cordiality. I didn't have to pretend at all. There was a time when just hearing her name, even if it was addressed to another woman, threw me into a tailspin. But here I am standing in front of the object of my death, and I feel completely in control. The same thing. You were lost when you transferred. Her eyes broke contact for a moment and looked down. Something like melancholy flashed across her face, but it was a quick flash. I nodded in agreement. Yes, I had to leave. I needed a change of scenery, you know? I needed to space. She nodded grimly at what remained unsaid. Yes, I think we both needed it. There was an awkward silence. She looked like she was going to say something else, but I heard myself being called. I had to break away from the conversation abruptly to recognize the waiter. As soon as I looked into his eyes, letting him know that the food was mine, I quickly returned my attention to Rachel. Well, it's my turn. It was nice to see you, Ratch. She smiled at me with thin lips and exhaled too loudly. She didn't seem to have finished this conversation yet, and was a little upset that we were interrupted. But all she said was, "It was nice to see you too, John." With that, I turned away from her to go get some food. I was about to leave, but when I passed Rachel, she lightly grabbed my arm to stop me. Hey, John, are you in a hurry? I was hoping that maybe we could, talk. There was a lot left unsaid between us. I wanted to refuse her. Memory lane is not exactly a walk in the park. But deep down, I knew she was right. The situation really needed to be clarified a bit. Of course, I don't have to come back right now. I'll take a table over there and wait for you, I said, pointing to an empty table in the corner of the restaurant. She tilted her head back and glanced over her shoulder to see where I was pointing. Her hair fanned out from the rapid movement of her head. If cameras had been pointed at her, this moment could have been slowed down and turned into a $1 million shampoo commercial. Okay, I'll take my order and join you, she said with a smile. I sat down at the table and began to lay out the contents of my lunch. I was a little annoyed because I had a bag of food instead of a tray, but using my bag as a plate for a meal change wasn't so bad. About 5 minutes later, Rachel sat down in the chair opposite me. At first, we both ate in silence. It was her party, so I assumed she would start over. Although I've had some burning questions that have plagued me over the past few years, I couldn't find the words to ask them. I was hoping that she would start talking and lead me to what I needed to know. Obviously, she had the same hope. So we both sat in awkward, tense silence, chewing. Neither of us tried to look into each other's eyes. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed that she was looking at the far wall. I was doing the same thing. Why did you do this to me, John? Why did you ruin my life? I looked at her and saw that her eyes were full of tears. A gun or a letter? Both. Mostly a letter. I actually understand guns, believe it or not. But you don't understand the letter? Really? She sniffed and wiped her eyes. No, I don't know. Not quite. I can understand your desire to kill me, although I will never believe that you would do that. You're too good a guy. But I would never have expected you to go out of your way and intentionally hurt me like this. With this letter, you decided to ruin my life. The way it was written, it was like you deliberately chose the wording that would cause the most damage. I thought you were different. I couldn't understand how I felt hearing her say that. It annoyed me the most. Did she break my heart as easily as a child breaks beautiful porcelain? And now she's judging me for what I did in retaliation, without even judging me for trying to kill her. She understood that. She was offended that I had told the truth about her. Despite my righteous indignation, there was something else that I also felt. Believe it or not, but at the same time I felt guilty. Not for what I did to her, but for why I did it. After I got over the pain, I was able to look back at my time with Rachel. All the memories I had with her, all the declarations of love, they weren't mine. They belonged to him. I felt bad because I didn't do it because it was the right thing to do. I wasn't being honest. I did it as a passive-aggressive act of revenge for a broken heart. She was right. I was completely different. I've always been taught to do the right thing. That's not what my father told me. But all the time I spent with her, after I found out she was married, I was someone I didn't recognize. But I'll be damned if she's going to judge me. Did you think that I was different in some way? Are you serious? No. You thought I'd just disappear and keep your dirty little secret. I wasn't the one who cheated on your husband, Rachel. It's all you. I didn't know him. I didn't like him. You loved him. You swore with him, and then you broke those vows with me. Now you want to blame the consequences of your failed marriage on me because I told him what you did to him. I think it's nonsense. If you want to blame someone for your marriage falling apart, look in the mirror. Her head snapped around to me, and our eyes finally met. I saw small embers of angry fire behind them, but they quickly went out. She couldn't argue with the truth. She knew I was right. After a moment, her eyes broke contact again, this time looking down at her food. You're right, she agreed reluctantly. Another awkward silence threatened to engulf us, so I decided it was my turn to ask what was secretly bothering me, even after all this time. Why didn't you choose me? If your marriage was as bad and unloved as you claimed, why did you stay in it? After all the times you said you loved me and all the plans we made, you still stayed with him. Why? She chewed on the roast so as not to answer right away. I waited for her to speak again. Now it was her turn to continue. I wasn't going to help her out by talking first. I really loved you, John. It's true. I wanted to leave him and run away with you. When I was with you, it seemed like the whole world stopped moving. Nothing else mattered. When I was away from you, I dreamed of seeing you again. But? I asked when she was silent for a moment longer than she should have been. I was afraid that she would run out of inertia. But I loved him too. Sorry. And this is also true. I know I told you the marriage was in trouble. It was like that for a while. Her gaze became distant before she continued. We were both very young when we met. In fact, I turned 20 just a few months ago. We can't break away from each other. After just 6 months of dating, we got married. We didn't even have a real wedding. It didn't matter at the time. The only thing we cared about was the vow of eternal love. The first few years were wonderful. We made love at every opportunity in any slightly covered place. We couldn't live more than a few hours without calling each other when we were separated. We even took a shower together every morning before going to work. Then there was tension between us. Work began to take up more and more of our time. I had to pay the bills. We had less time for each other because we were constantly working. When he was promoted, we thought that this was the answer to our prayers. But it wasn't like that. It actually widened the gap between us. He didn't have more time because he had more responsibility. On top of that, I still had to work because even though he was paid more, it wasn't enough. It seemed that when I was at home, he was not there, and vice versa. Then, when we were at home together, all we wanted was to sleep and relax. And that's where you met me, I interrupted, putting that part together. She nodded. Yes, when I met you, I had already forgotten what it was like to be desired and loved. I mean, men have always looked at me, but there was something wrong with you. You made me feel it, just like he did when we first met. It opened up a world that I had closed inside myself. Flirting, bed jokes, all this made me feel desirable. When I tried to revive life between Rob and me, he got upset. So I stopped trying. That is, with him. She looked at me and caught my eye. I nodded in agreement to her statement. I mean, I guess I was just supposed to be a lover at work, right? This time she nodded. At first, yes. Actually, you were supposed to be disposable. And what has changed? She looked at me with a shy smile and said, you were so good at it that I couldn't stop. I had to laugh. Thanks for the ego support. It's not for the sake of ego enhancement. I was just telling you why I kept going with you. Okay, so you wanted a romantic night job, but I put you to bed so well that you couldn't stop. There is no ego boost here. Please don't be shy. Go on, I said with a playful grin on my face, sipping my drink. Anyway, she said, giving me a playful look and throwing a napkin at me, I continued to date you. The more I saw you, the closer you became. I was gradually losing love for my husband. This lively banter between us was reminiscent of a long time ago. But this conversation wasn't supposed to inflame those feelings. He had to give us the answers we needed. Why didn't you just divorce him? I asked, bringing us back. Along with this question, the playfulness disappeared, and the conversation became serious again. Her face took on a grim expression. To be honest, I don't know. I definitely planned this. I even talked to divorce lawyers. I kept telling myself that I would do it eventually. All I needed was the right time. But you never did. Although you always told me what you would do. I paused and put my elbows on the table, putting my palms together and forming a triangle. Then I rested my chin on my fists. Exhaling, I said, do you want to know what I think? I think there was never a good time because you were never going to do it. Am I right? She wiped a tear from her eye and nodded. Yes. I pursed my lips, frowning, and suppressed the sluggish response that was trying to escape. I raised my head, took a deep breath, and carefully chose the following words. You're going to have to help me, Ratch, because I think you're a heartless fool. Okay, I probably didn't choose my words carefully enough. And yet my answer was honest. She looked at me with eyes full of pain and surprise. I jumped up and continued. Do you want me to believe that you're not the monster I think you are? But the facts paint a different picture. You were married, and you made me believe that you were single. When I found out that you were married, you made me believe that the marriage was in danger, even though you just admitted that you had no real intention of ending it. You went on dates with me, talked about the future with me, and even had a fucking baby with me. For God's sake, we even looked for a house together. You even chose one that was exactly what you dreamed of when you were a child. But after all of this, you're sitting here and saying it was just your fantasy. I was a distraction to entertain you while you waited for your marriage to return to normal. It sounds so evil when you say that, she said, still stung by my attack on her. I let out a cynical laugh. That's how it is, isn't it? You should have told me that you were just playing a game to spice up your life. Maybe then I wouldn't involve my heart in this. It took her a minute to gather her thoughts before she answered. I wasn't trying to play with you, John. Our relationship was developing faster than I expected, and I started to get confused. But you can't honestly sit around and pretend to be an unsuspecting victim. Yes, I didn't tell you I was married, but you found out at that Christmas party. Did you leave? No, you stayed anyway. You've been in a relationship with a married woman for many years. You didn't give a damn about my husband. What you really wanted was for me to leave him and take you in his place. Your sanctimonious need for truth and justice only manifested itself after I didn't choose you. I may have cheated, but you know what? And you too. At least I have the decency to admit it after all these years. So please curb your arrogance and stop judging me as if you were accidentally scammed. We were silent for a while, as if we needed a break. I didn't want to admit it, but there was a lot of truth in what she was saying. I really had a hand in all of this. Of course, she still has the lion's share, but I also made a significant contribution to the shit that splattered after it hit the fan. The only real victim in this whole case was Rob. And yet, she was crazy if she felt that. I'm as guilty as she is. Anyway, you lied to me anyway. Not only about being married, but also about how little your marriage meant to you. You kept telling me that you were both heading for disaster, but I saw the way he looked at you that night, the way you both looked at each other. There was real love there. You made me believe that it didn't happen because you knew that if you had told me the truth, I wouldn't have fallen in love with you. Is that what you're thinking? Do you think that I came up with this whole plan to make you fall in love with me in order to leave you at the last minute? Come on, John. She shifted in her chair and crossed her arms. We sat in silence, listening to my watch count down the seconds. People were talking and eating merrily around us, as if we didn't exist. It's funny how life works. No matter how much your world suffers, everything else moves without any hesitation. Listen, John, she began again, breaking the silence. At the time when you were supposed to be temporary, I didn't tell you about Rob because I felt it didn't matter. The plan was to date together, relieve some stress, and then go their separate ways with pleasant memories. Deep down, I always thought that my marriage would eventually return to normal. I decided that we were in a win-win situation. I get a mental break from a distant marriage, and you get a free, unconditional lovemaking. What I didn't expect was that you'd be so funny and sweet. How you touched me, kissed me, loved me. It was fine. You made me feel beautiful. I should have stopped it after that time. You've been a problem for me, but I didn't do it. After a while, I felt more and more attracted to you. When it happened, it became harder for me to tell you. And then the Christmas party happened. Yes, a Christmas party, I said dejectedly, as the memories of that evening came flooding back to me. To find out that the woman I was falling in love with was actually married to someone else was a punch in the gut to an infinite degree. She shrugged her shoulders. You're saying that Rob and I were so in love that night. That's how we looked to everyone. Everyone thought we had a perfect marriage. We were good at it, pretending that everything was fine. But in the end, you chose him, so it couldn't have been fake. Before she spoke, she smiled a kind of nostalgic smile. Something happened between us. I can't say exactly when or what it was, but something clicked. Maybe it was on his part, or maybe I was just radiating a different vibe. I don't know. All I know is that we just started clicking again. It seemed that we had been in this thick fog for so long that we had forgotten about the sunlight. Then suddenly everything cleared up, and we finally saw each other. I snorted and shook my head. Then he smiled bitterly and said, "At the same time, you had that annoying affair on the side that you had to get rid of." She reached across the table and grabbed my hand. "Maybe it was like that at first, but you've become much bigger. You can be mad at me for a lot of things. God knows you have options to choose from, but I can't let you think that I made the decision to let you go easily. It was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do." I pulled my hand away from her. Who cares how hard it was for her to break my heart? It won't be able to restore it. In fact, it looked pretty selfish. Was she a victim now? What about our son? I asked, changing the subject. I'm tired of hearing how much she didn't want to hurt me. It was time to move on to another topic that was bothering me. Bobby? What about him? Does he know about me? She had eyes full of tears again. No, he is only 6 years old. He is too young to understand this. Fortunately, he was young enough not to fully understand what was going on between his father and me. All he knows is that Dad doesn't live with us anymore, but he still spends a lot of time with him. He gets double presents for Christmas and birthdays, and his dad comes and takes him for ice cream. If I tell him about you, it will be many years later. She wiped her eyes, then remembered something. She looked at me with narrowed eyes and asked, "Just curious, I guess. You know I've always wanted a son. I told you so. Now I have him, but I don't have the opportunity to participate in any part of his life. It's just hard for me, that's all." She continued to look at me suspiciously. "You're not going to make a fuss about Bobby, are you? If so, then don't," she said in a voice that sounded both warning and threat. Look, Ratch, I'm not trying to ruin everything for you. Not really. But you have to understand what I'm going through right now. I have a son who doesn't know anything about me. You forget that I wanted to take you away and arrange your life. When you told me you were pregnant and that the baby was probably mine, I dreamed of a future with you and Bobby. You snatched that dream away from me. She stared at me in disbelief, and then her face turned angry. What are you going through? Do I have to understand what you're going through? You've been gone for 3 years, and you didn't even pick up the phone to see if Bobby was okay. I haven't seen a single alimony check from you, and you haven't even tried to start doing it. So, don't you dare sit here and try to claim it as if you've been tricked. The reason I didn't do it was because I've been your little dark secret for 4 years. I couldn't be near my son, because if I were there, you'd have to tell your husband who his real father is. Okay, I understand. And what do you justify the last 3 years? She challenged me. After you blew up my life and told Rob everything, why didn't you try to help your son? I needed to get away from you. If I had stayed, I would have done something crazy. I left for our safety. She leaned back in her chair and glared at me. So you left your son, the son you always wanted, because you couldn't control yourself around your mother? Don't you dare turn this against me. You broke my heart. She leaned forward and gave me a challenging look. I have nothing against you, John, but I want to say one thing. Yes, I broke your heart. I'm a terrible person for a serious relationship, but do you know who else has a broken heart? Roberts. Actually, I broke it even worse, but you know what? He stayed nearby for Bobby's sake. Maybe he didn't want to be married to me anymore, but he loved his son enough to find a way to stay in his life. He is Bobby's father and has been for 6 years. He's the one on the birth certificate. He had been looking after him for the last 3 years, even though he knew that biologically Bobby was not his. He picks Bobby up from the babysitter when I can't, and spends every weekend with him at his house. He even makes sure that I have all of Bobby's favorite dishes in my house when I don't have the money for it. Would you do that? My only response was silence. However, it didn't matter. She did not expect anything profound in response, continuing. Robert has earned the right to be Bobby's father. Not you. I'm not going to spoil it for any of them. I've already done enough. So, I'm sorry that you feel like you pulled out a short match, but that's what it is. I care about what's best for Bobby, and you don't. As much as I'd like to deny it, she was 100% right. I felt a pang of jealousy at the thought that her ex-husband turned out to be a better father than me, but I couldn't dispute the facts. There was no place in my life for a child, at least, for one who was born in such conditions. I wasn't the best option for Bobby because, in the end, I couldn't be there for him as the person who raised him. I was not constantly present in his life. I would have made a life in another city. I really wanted to have children, but I wanted everything. I wanted my wife to go with the children. Selfish? Maybe, but not as selfish as it would be to destroy what Bobby had with Robert Sr., just because I had some technical claims about his background. His father was with him, who took responsibility for him with honor. He chose Bobby, despite all the troubles that surrounded him. You're right, I said, nodding in agreement. She visibly relaxed and took a deep breath, as if she had held her breath for a minute. I just have one last question, Ratch. If you had to do it over and over again, would you do it differently? Would you choose me? She thought for a minute, and then looked at me with a strange look. I couldn't tell what it was, but it seemed to me that she was trying to think of a better way to say what she wanted. Yes, I would have done it differently, but not the way you think. She paused and looked at me with the same look again. This time I figured out its meaning. She tried not to hurt my feelings. If I had to do it again, I wouldn't contact you at all. I fell in love with you, and that prevented me from working on my marriage. No matter how much I loved you, I always loved him more. I didn't realize it until it was too late, because I wasn't being honest with you or with myself. I had the love of two great men, and I lost them both because I didn't listen to my heart from the very beginning. Even though I had already overcome the pain of the past, it still hurt me to hear that our time together was a mistake in her mind. I agreed with her, but it still felt like another rejection. However, that was exactly what I needed to hear. I also believe that's exactly what she wanted to tell me. She had to say those words out loud to give them life. They must have been running through her head ever since her husband received the letter. Saying them out loud and hearing them pronounced, we felt a sense of completion. At this point, we could both close the book of our lives and put it away forever. Shortly after that, our lunch ended. There was nothing more to say. Leaving the restaurant, we said goodbye. We even hugged one last time, saying goodbye. Then she turned left and I turned right. Every step we took us further and further apart as we left each other's lives for the last time. Neither of us turned to look at the other's retreating figure.